Hello, this is Ellen Broderick with the Inspired Living with Ellen Broderick podcast. Each week, we delve into a conversation with someone who has found a passion and is pursuing it. And this week, my guest is Mark Fischler. Mark is a professor of criminal justice at Plymouth State University. And prior to joining Plymouth State faculty, he practiced law for the New Hampshire Public Defender's Office. Mark has worked extensively with alternative theoretical models in law, constitutional law, and higher education, and has published on integral applications to teaching, being a lawyer, and legal theory. His focus in the classroom is ethics and criminal procedure. And Professor Fischler was awarded the Outstanding Teaching Award at Plymouth State University in 2014. In addition, and lastly, I will say that that Mark also has a podcast called Integral Justice Warrior, and it's really worth taking a listen to. And it is, I believe, it comes out once a month. Is that right?
That's right.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, welcome, Mark. So nice to have you here.
Thank you, Ellen. It's great to be with you, and I love the fact that you do this podcast. You've had some phenomenal guests, so I'm honored to be amongst them.
Well, thank you. And we actually, I'm just going to give a little bit of a connection that I knew you as a very young child because I was a teacher of your younger sister.
That's right.
And a friend of your parents. And so then didn't meet you again until recently. And
Yes.
And it's just a real joy to reconnect with you and to find out about your life's journey. And I'm really looking forward to learning more about that now.
Yeah. Well, it's great to have that long time connectivity with another human being, and so that's great. And I appreciate the fact that you're back in the community and connected well with my parents, and that really brings a lot of joy to their life as well
As mine. And so let's start with that connectivity, because that seems to me to be one of the things that you're particularly have as a focal point in your life, is the importance of connecting with others and in a deep and genuine way. Can you tell me just a little bit about where you feel that may have had its roots in your life?
Yeah. It's interesting. I think if I really look at it, when I was in law school, I did something called trial practice. I did this competition where we had to go against other New England law schools in kind of like a trial setting process. And so I was different than the other people on our teams that in their approach to the law. I was a lot more kind of emotionally kind of available and not as purely analytical as probably my coaches really wanted me to be, or my professors wanted me to be, and actually criticized me about that. But I had read an attorney named Jerry Spence, who I actually have some of his books in my office here, and Spence was this great lawyer who did things very differently than other lawyers. He was a human being first, and I had the opportunity after I graduated law school to actually go to his trial lawyers college in Wyoming, and it was like a huge deal. I mean, to meet this person that I revered and looked up to, and was accepted to his trial lawyers college, which was a month-long process. And the first 4 days was just being in therapy, literally working with therapists. And the book we read before we got out there was On Becoming a Person by Carl Rogers, the great humanistic psychotherapist. And So Spence really taught me that I had to love my clients and I had to be one with the jury. And I had to be emotionally available and authentic. And that meant being, learning to know who I was as a human being. And so really valuing that kind of internal processing. Uh, I got it. I really, like, I felt so free and at home at his trialers college with that approach that, it's really kind of guided my way of being a professor as well. And so I want to build an authentic relationship with my students, where they truly know that at the end of the day that I truly care about them, that I love them, and I care about them, even if it's going to be a tough grade, even if things aren't going to go the way that they think they need to go at that moment. And that means, owning up if I make mistakes or if I'm not seeing things as clearly, really trying not to be a sage on a stage, but just a authentic person who's in the process of learning and growing with them in those moments of time. So, I try to apply that with all of my relationships, and that each day is a unique opportunity to get to know other human beings and to have a truly open mind and process to kind of to not know who you are, meaning I get to know who you are, because I don't have any assumptions or beliefs or who you are or understanding why we might be called together at this moment, but knowing that God, the universe, the way, the path has opened up this moment in time for you and I to spend some time together like we are right now. Yeah. Giving us a moment of authentic relationship building.
Yeah. Yeah, as you're speaking about that, Mark, I'm thinking about the moments that we can um, really know that we're hovering right in this moment, with another human being, and not moving to what's coming next, not regretting what's come before,
Yeah.
but actually being here with another person and what that shows us about ourselves. And so I think it's really interesting that part of the first training in that did you call
Trialers
it
College. It was called the
private?
Trialers College. Yeah.
Yeah.
TLC, tender loving care.
Yeah, it
But,
is to actually really look at yourself and
yeah,
to see yourself afresh and anew, and maybe with eyes that are not trying to make yourself what you think other people want you to be,
yeah,
what you
yeah.
want yourself to be, but actually experience you as you are. And
Yes, exactly.
I was wondering how that changed, because you still practiced law, even though you're now a professor. You practiced law for 3.5, 4 years,
Yeah,
something like
I
that.
did. And it's interesting. I can remember there was a moment at the Trialers College where I had this insight about myself, that, saw that I wasn't as emotionally available as I thought I should be, or I realized I was selective in terms of the people that I paid attention to. And I remember that I made a commitment in those first couple of days there. I think it was probably the second day, that I was going to get to know every single person at the Trialers College, including the ranch hand, including the cook, including other students like myself that I might not have been as interested in. But I really made a commitment. I'm going to get to know every single person here. And that and by the end of the month, some things became apparent that was starting to be noticed, and I was getting really positive feedback about that level of interest and genuine caring for others. And so I brought that back into my practice as a lawyer, where I got to know the police officers I was kind of going against. I got to know the judges. I got to know the court clerks and stuff about their family and their trips, and the prosecutors. I really tried to build that authentic relationship, and I try to continue to do that to this day. And as a practice, is really a spiritual practice. And because in the process, you kind of end up seeing, kind of with gratitude, like the relationship, the opportunities that we have to care for each other, and that's developed a sense of gratitude and appreciation for all beings. And I've had different spiritual practices that I've kind of played out in my life, and one of them is something to do with something called the Bodhisattva vow, which is a Buddhist vow of being there for all human beings, and kind of putting their well-being ahead of yours. And there's something to that that's incredibly powerful, because the irony of it is that the more we focus on ourselves, the less happy we are. And so part of that is because we have a misguided notion of self anyway. And so the more we worship that misidentification, obviously the more problematic it is. But thinking of others allows us to see the interconnection with other beings. And like Martin Luther King talked about, that we're all tied in an inescapable web of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny, that whatever impacts one directly impacts us all indirectly. And there's absolute truth there. Absolutely. And so if we can see that and feel that, we can develop a really different relationship with other human beings.
I think this is happening. I think that the separateness that we experience, in which we think, oh, I have to take care of just me, I have to take care of me and mine, I have to make sure that I get ahead, that is shifting into more and more people coming out and speaking about the fact that it's actually oneness. It's remembering that that the separation is actually into I or me, mine, is not actually the whole story. It's not completely accurate. And so I'm wondering, where did you, how did your spiritual life develop to bring you to a place where you've got a clarity about these things?
Yeah. Well, it's I had a moment in time where where everything changed for me. And it was August of 1996. I was in Yellowstone National Park with my parents and my sister. We were on a journey where we had visited with my grandparents in Aurora, Colorado, and they were on their last legs for various reasons. And so we were in Yellowstone because we couldn't stay with them for too long because they were pretty sick. So we made our way up to Yellowstone National Park, and we were driving through, and I had this agenda. And I look back now and at kind of the ridiculousness of it all, but I had this agenda where I needed to reach the border of Montana and touch the border of Idaho so I could add those states to my list. I needed to get to those two places and then get back to the resort that we were staying at. I think it was the Old Faithful, beautiful resort in the park. And so we could get back in time so I could have dinner at the restaurant and not the cafeteria, because I was owed that by my dad and mom. I'm like thinking this way. And so I'm driving through a place called Hayden Valley, and which is, if you haven't been, it's this beautiful, vast, beautiful valleys where, animals are crossing the street, and and doing, beautiful animal stuff. It's like the Serengeti, you see in Africa. And so these animals are like crossing the street and cars are driving slow, and I'm start yelling at the car in front of me because it's driving too slow, and I'm swearing. And my dad, looked over at me and he said, hey, Mark, he goes, why don't you think about the father and the son? We had seen a father and a son. The son was in a wheelchair earlier that day, and the father was bringing him down to see the lower falls. And it was kind of like a hike down, and it was a poignant moment. And my dad said, why don't you think about the father and the son, who's in the wheelchair still trying to make their way up the mountain while you yell about what? And it was, my karma was ready, I guess, in that moment to fully hear that. And because I didn't say anything to anybody, but I took my foot off the pedal, and I said to myself, there's something terribly wrong with how you're relating with the world. And so I saw my self-absorption, I saw my lack of gratitude, I saw all of it. And I there was no going back. I couldn't go back to that. And so I got silent. I went the only way I could control my impulse to judge and lack gratitude and share criticism, and was to just not even talk. And that was, I tried to, and so I think I was whispering. And I know that if my family's honest, that's all, because I've told this story. So I think they have a phony memory of it happening now, but they do remember me talking, like kind of whispering, because that's all I could do to control it. I remember I'd go to a market in Jackson Hole, and I'd have to keep my head down because I was just judging every person in the market. So we made our way to Aspen, kind of doing a loop, getting back to Aurora, Colorado. My daughter's name is Aurora. So there's been that connection with my grandparents, with her name. And I went to a bookstore and I got a book on Zen Buddhism, and called The Three Pillars of Zen by Roshi Philip Kapleau. It was the 30th anniversary edition. And I think I'd been introduced to Zen a little bit, read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, kind of knew some concepts, but I don't know why I chose it. I don't have a really good reason. I just had a feeling it was going to help me. So I started meditating. And I was in the closet about that for like a long period of time. I didn't really share that with others. I remember when I got back to law school, I would lock the door in my bedroom, and my two best friends now were my roommates at the time. And, I would meditate for like 5 minutes on my pillows on my bed, and then and do some reading. And then I'd come out and I'd be like, hey guys, like, let's go to school. And but I started to notice some difference. Started to notice some differences within about a month of meditating. And so I've been
And
on
can
the
you say
path ever
what you
since.
noticed, in that month?
Yeah, what I noticed was there was space between my thoughts. And I noticed that thoughts kind of came and went, and that the gravity of my thoughts started to lessen a little bit. I started to see a space between my thoughts, and then my relation to them started to slowly change. And so that was very powerful to start to experience that. I remember there was a moment where I was like, God, I'm just not reacting as quickly to things. And I'm like, why is that? And I was like, oh my God, it's the meditation. Like there's this little space now between what would have been my impulse to like jump down someone's throat. I'm still jumping on their throat, but there's like this 5-second pause before I do that. And I'm like, what is happening to me? How is that? And it had to do with meditation. That's grown over time.
So meditation, so I was thinking the book probably found you as opposed to you finding, that there's that
Yeah.
concept as well, being out in the middle of Wyoming. Were you still in
Yeah.
Wyoming? And going into a bookstore, this is what you left with.
Yeah.
And the thought was that you found something, right? And
Mhm.
and that is true. And the rest of it may be that it also found you.
Yeah.
I love the concept of what we are looking for is also looking for us.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because Wyoming, that other story I told you about the Trialers College, which came after that kind of awakening experience I had, was in Wyoming as well. And so, Wyoming has been this place where I've kind of had some kind of insights and awakenings experience out in that land. And so I have a tender place in my heart. And I was actually fortunate in the summer of 2021. I was able to take my daughter and my wife, and we drove through Hayden Valley. And, I did a couple of posts about that on some, online venues. And that was just great to actually be back in that space and to feel the holiness of that beautiful territory.
And this is where you were introduced to meditation, and that continues. You still meditate now?
Yeah, I do. I have practices I do every day. I try to offer it. I do something with students here at the university called Mindful Inquiry, and where the students that want to do it, we get together once a week and we meditate, and then we have contemplative kind of conversations to kind of jump into the deeper end of the pool. But I try to do stuff every day, and I have my own teachers, and I try to offer that to others as well. I do workshops through Satya Yoga Studio here in Plymouth, and stuff around things like the Four Agreements from Miguel Ruiz. When I went on my deep spiritual journey, where I left everything, including being a lawyer, that period of in between being a professor and a lawyer, I ended up connecting with the Toltec spiritual tradition and working with a teacher by the name of La Doña Ginny Gentry, and living on her land in New Mexico for about a year and a half of my life, living in a yurt, and which was a life-changing experience.
And how did you get introduced to her, and what changed in your life as a result of that?
Well, when I was in New Hampshire and I was practicing law, I had a friend who was it was Bob Whitney, and he was in my wedding, and Bob had some friends that were connected to the Toltec community, and there was a teacher that kind of came out and did some work, and she was a healer, and I had some work done with her. Her name was Deborah Lord, and she introduced me to the book The Four Agreements by Miguel Ruiz, and that was just powerful as heck, reading that, and kind of like these four governing principles on how to conduct your life, which each of the agreements is powerful into itself and a deep spiritual dive. And so I got into the book, really tried to follow it. And so when I went, when I got a hit from the universe, a big hit that I was supposed to leave everything and give my law practice up, my life up, where I was in Sugar Hill, New Hampshire. And that just made no sense on a rational level, but I knew I was called and I had to do it.
What did that look like? I'm thinking about people who may not have had this kind of experience, or
Yeah.
people who have. And what did it look like for you? Like what?
Yeah, it was, I've been practicing spiritually for, I guess, consciously for about 4 years. And I just had an intuitive notion. I remember I was in my apartment in Sugar Hill, uh, and it was in a farmhouse. And I think I'd just gone hiking, and I I was alone, and I just said out loud, like, am I supposed to leave everything? I don't know why that idea came across, because my career was by by all measurements really successful. Things were going extremely well. I was getting great feedback from juries, and developing a reputation. And so it just made no sense, but I said it. And when I said it, I got this, soul feeling like rushed through my body, that was overwhelming, that indicated, yes, you are supposed to leave. And I was like, what? And I denied it at first. And then I said it again about a month later. It was during the summer. And then boom, this rush of feeling just hit me like a ton of bricks. And that, yes. And so I was like, okay. And then boom. And so it's just kind of soul level expression. And so, it's really, in some ways, I've tried to build my life of just following that voice. Um, Socrates talked about that in his life. He had an inner, um, a kind of a voice within that he followed for everything, including being willing to accept to drink the hemlock and die. His inner voice was clear that that wasn't such a bad option, and so that's what happened. And so then when I knew I was supposed to leave everything, I knew it was a spiritual journey I was going on, and so I set out to meet various spiritual teachers, spent some time up at Karma Choling in Vermont, went down to the Bo Lozoff, a great spiritual teacher who's passed, who did work with the Prison Dharma Network, and wrote a great book called We're All Doing Time, one of his many spiritual classics. Spent time down there in North Carolina with him. And then I knew I was going to make my way to New Mexico, because Miguel Ruiz had like an Easter weekend in Santa Fe. And during that Easter weekend, Ginny was one of the main teachers with Miguel for that weekend. And Ginny was offering, after Miguel's workshop, a 5-day intensive on her land, which is called Garden of the Goddess Retreat Center. And
And this is Miguel Ruiz.
Miguel Ruiz. Well, I went to Miguel's Easter weekend, and my soon-to-be teacher Ginny Gentry was teaching at that, but she also had a 5-day workshop after his on her land in Santa Fe, or Cerrillos, next to Santa Fe. And so with some friends that I made there, they said, we're going to Ginny's, you can stay at our house. And I was like, and I'll be honest, like, I did not like her at first. She rubbed me the wrong way, rubbed my ego the wrong way. And I remember being in the backyard, this beautiful home, $1 million home in Santa Fe. And I'm like, wow, I mean, it looks like the world is just open for you to go to this workshop. I mean, you don't have to get to live at this person's house. Your friends that you made at the workshop are going, what else are you going to do? And I really didn't have a plan after Santa Fe. I was probably like going to go see friends in Boulder. So I went, and then she became my teacher, and I started living on our land, and yeah, the rest is history on that front.
And then what brought you from that to Ken Wilbur and his work?
Yeah. Yeah. So I remember when I was out there, I was reading a magazine called What is Enlightenment magazine, which was a great magazine. I'm bummed they don't do it anymore. But there was, I kept seeing like these ads about this philosopher who connects Eastern and Western wisdom. And I was into philosophy. I was into obviously Eastern spiritual traditions, but I had, like I said, this appreciation for Plato and Socrates and other Western philosophy in general. And I was like, someone can connect those two worlds. I mean, that is fascinating. And that's Wilbur. And um, and so, there had always been this kind of, when I was in law school, I'm into like jurisprudence and legal philosophy as well. There's always this dichotomy between legal positivism, which is kind of like the observable factual law, and then this other area called natural law, which is kind of like the more interior, like it's what is just and right. And you were always supposed to choose sides. Like, which side did you think the law really was? And the reality is that it's both. And Wilbur was able to show me how it is both, and you can integrate it. And so I remember when I started reading him, I just had this great level of dissonance reduction, because I started to see things in whole parts as opposed to this division, and where it had to be one thing or the other. And so, I just was blown away by someone that was able to, to be a serious philosopher of Eastern and Western tradition, and also have spiritual awareness. And, any book you ever read with Ken, he's always going to point out that ultimate truth in there about, what ultimately is the unity consciousness, or the self beyond the self. And so I've just have a deep, abiding appreciation for Ken and his work, and which has certainly been the single greatest influence on my philosophical approach and my understanding of spirituality, the various teachers he's introduced me to. And so it's been great. In fact, I just got back from Sedona, Arizona, where we had an integral conference, first one I've been to in person in a long time. And I was honored that I actually got a keynote opportunity, which was great. And it was great to connect with some very spiritually aware human beings who have kind of that integration understanding of life in the world. And so it was great to be with those folks.
And what were you speaking on there?
My presentation was on an approach that I'm trying to develop as kind of an answer to originalism, which is kind of this legal philosophy that was used in the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe versus Wade. And so I'm calling it integral democratic inclusivity as a theory of constitutional law. And so I was explaining how, from a developmental perspective, we've moved from kind of, traditional to modern to postmodern to what I believe integral is the next stage of awareness and understanding. And so I tried to lay out a legal philosophy that I think fits that integral approach that I think goes beyond postmodern, always transcending and including the previous points of view. And that I think originalism really kind of is a traditional to a modern approach on understanding law and understanding the world in general, and that we've got to move to a more integrated way of seeing the world to kind of to really save ourselves. I mean, with the climate issue and our lack of clarity on truly the kind of more cosmopolitan nature of who we are as beings, as opposed to this kind of ethnocentric way of, my people, our way, kind of moving to, a post-racial way of seeing other human beings as our natural brothers and sisters on the planet, and that we are really one being, all 8 billion of us, plus our animal brothers and sisters and all sentient plant life. And can we have that awareness, and how can we make it work to have a more functional universe?
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
I think we are heading there. And I think the chaos that we are experiencing still in the world, and extremely, it is preceding the settling and clarity that that I believe is actually already here, and that we are beginning to, like, I think the dust is beginning to clear, so that people can actually, on a very visceral level, feel that oneness and have these kind of moments of, oh, that's what that means. Which, for things like, I was singing the Saint Francis of Assisi song, his prayer, but it was put to music, and I wanted to switch a few words in it, because I thought, I thought there was some language that could be improved upon a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think the prayer itself is very powerful. And so I switched from Lord, I think it was, it says,
Yeah.
Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. And I switched it to, I think I want to say, what I want to say there is, Holy One. And then I thought, oh my God, it's not like the Holy One is not like something out there. It's the
Right.
Holy One. And, for somebody who has really thought on a lot of levels around, contemplative practices and whatnot for a long time, it was an aha moment that maybe many people have had, well before, but it was one of those moments of course, that's what it means. And I had no idea.
Yeah.
So I love this idea about, really approaching, other things, that you're bringing your strengths together and your passions together in taking this spiritual aspect and applying it to the law, applying it to our concepts and our way of looking. Because when you were talking about the space between things that is created when you meditate, it's those spaces that allow us to think differently, it allows for it allows for revelation, I think. And it seems to me that that what you're bringing to the concepts that are in constitutional law is revelation, there's a bigger, broader way to think about this. There's a totally inclusive way to be thinking about it, and it doesn't make anybody smaller or bigger.
Right.
It actually allows for that whole to be complete and non-discriminatory.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like some of our ideas of things like property, these kind of Lockean, 17th, 18th century, very wise, smart people, but kind of we kind of have locked into this idea that this property is ours, and that's kind of like the domain or the essential way that we are people is by having this property. And I think that notion is limited in its understanding, because ultimately the property is beyond ours. It's everyone's. It's no one's. And so to kind of start to see that, or start to have laws that help us see that we as human beings are all connected, including with plants and animals, and what we can do if we can see that and understand that and have that insight, how we might change the way that we treat each other, that these notions that we have, these borders, are kind of illusory. If you kind of like look at the world, you can tell how like all the pieces kind of fit together at one point.
Yeah.
And in human history, or in the Earth's history, beyond humans. And how can we start to recognize that deeper reality, that deeper truth, and because just through that revelation, using your language, which I think is beautiful, just by that revelation, it changes the way that I look at you. It changes the way that I relate to this idea that I am an American or a New Hampshireite or whatever that might be. It just changes all of that, because you're starting to take a more 30,000-foot view of things, and but with that spiritual understanding, as you mentioned. And I feel inside that is necessary for our survival, is to awaken to those deeper truths.
Yes, again, amen. Do you know
Yeah.
the story of the 100th monkey?
I at some point, but tell me,
Yeah,
tell our
so
reader or
on
listener.
these islands that were all separated from each other, there were monkeys, and they all ate their food in just ate it. And at one day, one monkey started to wash the fruit before he ate it, and then a few other monkeys started to do that. And 100th is actually just, I think, an arbitrary number, but that when the 100th monkey started to wash his fruit on that island, monkeys on all the islands started to wash the fruit. It was a leap of consciousness that then
Yeah.
transcended borders. And it's reminding me of what you're pointing to here, which is beyond. It almost becomes a non-issue how you're going to treat somebody else.
Right.
If you hold a perspective that that each person holds some aspect of the whole, and that it is that all the perspectives together which bring us this beautiful experience that we have of life.
Yeah. Yeah. In Buddhism, there's some teachings that talk about the fact that every single person you've met has been your mother or father in a different life, meaning that the soul, as it has gone through different bodies of experiencing the world, has that. And if that's the case, that includes your so-called enemies.
Yeah.
And that includes the person that's the cashier at Hannaford's or Market Basket that you don't really pay any attention to. And I'm being general, not everybody, maybe some do. And I appreciate that if you do, but it includes all those beings, everyone,
And
every person that you go by. And so that is a powerful teaching. And if you can take that in, then again, it changes the way that we treat each other.
and as you were saying too, I have something to learn from everybody,
Yeah.
and they have something to show me that I need to see.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. I mean, I was in Rand's hardware store this morning picking up something for my wife, who's a lot more handy than I am in the home. And the guy was kind of explaining these different parts of how these pieces fit together. And he was a lot more knowledgeable than I was. And so I had something to learn from them. And you know, if you can take that approach, it's in Buddhism, they kind of call it the beginner's mind. And Socrates knew he was the wisest only because he knew he did not know, and that he lived a life from that space of not knowing. And it allows us to be curious. And you know, Plato said the beginning of philosophy is curiosity. And so, you know, in curiosity allows us to be in the fully present moment, to be open to see what Ellen might have to teach me today. You know, and because I'm going to take away, you know, your insight about, you know, utilizing this insight of revelation. And I really kind of like that, and how to relate to the insights that we gain over time. And so, but can we do that with every single human being? Can we do that with every single moment? Because ultimately, the only moment we have is now.
Yeah.
There is no other moment than now. And how fully present can I be? And the way it makes the most sense is to not know. And that allows me to be fully present and not full of this misidentified self that thinks
Hubris.
that has this time and place stamp, and you know, because and realize the illusory nature of thoughts, and how they don't have the weight that we thought they did. And start to kind of realize that, you know, we are far more than Mark Fischler, you know, that the capital self, which is beyond this selfhood, is where the action's really at, and that's a unity consciousness with all things at all time.
Mark, this has been a delight. And and I will look forward to continuing conversations with you,
Yeah.
you know, through the years now. And but I feel just so so blessed to have been able to take this time with you today, and be opened and inspired by your insights and by your experiences in life, and by your openness to bring yourself, you know, fully to whatever it is that you're doing. I think it is an inspiration to all of us.
Thank you so much, Ellen. And it's been an honor to spend this time with you and your listeners. And you know, many blessings on the path ahead. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving with your family. And I'm going to be looking forward to these conversations with you in the future.
Great. And for the Inspired Living with Ellen Broderick podcast, my guest today has been Mark Fischler, and we'll see you all next week. Take care.